I am Grace Harper, 36 years old, a military nurse stationed at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. 8 long months away from home, away from my 2 boys, I had grown accustomed to the regimented rhythm of military life. The sterile corridors, the faint antiseptic smell, the echoing footsteps of soldiers passing by. But nothing could have prepared me for the call that made my heart stop. Your son, Ethan, 15, has knocked his stepmother unconscious at her new husband's wedding. He's facing assault charges. The words reverberated through me like a gunshot. Ethan? My timid, gentle boy, the same child who once wept inconsolably when he accidentally crushed an ant, suddenly branded a criminal? My mind refused to grasp it. I pictured him in my mind, pale and anxious, standing amidst a room of shocked relatives, while the consequences of a single moment loomed over him like a dark cloud. Without a second thought, I requested emergency leave. My stomach churned as I booked the 20-hour flight from Germany back to the United States. The thought of seeing Ethan, of holding him, reassuring him, protecting him, filling every corner of my mind. The distance I had endured these past months felt unbearable now. I could only pray that my presence would be enough to guide him through this unimaginable nightmare, and that somehow he would emerge from it unbroken. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories. They're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. The moment of collapse. When I finally set foot in the house of my ex-husband, James Carter, 40, a construction engineer in Raleigh, the scene that greeted me felt like stepping into a courtroom drama. The dried blood of Lillian Brooks, 32, James's new wife and a bank officer, still stained the walkway, a stark and shocking testament to the violence that had unfolded. My stomach churned as I approached the door, the air thick with tension and unspoken accusations. James swung the door open, his face flushed red with anger. "We're going to sue Ethan to the fullest extent of the law," he bellowed, his voice echoing through the hallway. Inside the living room, James's family had gathered like a jury ready to pass judgment. His parents, Harold and Evelyn Carter, both retired, sat stiffly, eyes sharp and lips pursed. Beside them was James's younger brother, Nathan, 35, a programmer, and his sister, Clara, 38, a freelance journalist, her gaze scrutinizing and unreadable. Parents of Lillian, George, and Patricia Brooks stood like bodyguards, their expressions icy, radiating disdain and protective fury. The center of it all was Lillian herself, face bandaged, eyes bruised and swollen, tears streaming freely down her cheeks. Her sobs filled the room, a haunting soundtrack to the confrontation. And there, across from all of them, sat Ethan, my timid, gentle son. Only now he was transformed in the eyes of everyone else, a figure of accusation, tension, and fear. Yet he sat upright, his back straight, chin lifted, a calm resolve radiating from him that I had never seen before. When his eyes met mine, I saw no fear, no regret, only a piercing certainty that seemed to say, "Mom, I did what I had to do." My heart clenched so tightly I could barely breathe. Every motherly instinct surged, a mix of fear, pride, and disbelief. I wanted to rush to him, to hold him, to shield him from the storm of judgment surrounding him, yet I knew I had to understand the truth first. "He's a monster," James roared, pointing directly at Ethan, his voice splitting the air with fury. Lillian's cries grew louder, a raw mixture of pain and anger, yet my eyes remained locked on my son. His small hands, swollen and bruised from the blows he had delivered, twitched at his sides. I knelt slightly to meet his gaze, forcing myself to remain calm, to hear him out. "Ethan," I said softly, my voice trembling despite my effort to steady it, "tell me exactly what happened." The room seemed to hold its breath. Every person, every pair of eyes was fixed on him. The air was heavy with accusation, fear, and the raw tension of confrontation. And there he sat, unwavering, prepared to speak his truth in the face of a world that already condemned him. The horrifying secret. Ethan scanned the room slowly, as if he wanted to memorize every face, every expression, every flicker of disbelief and accusation. Then he spoke, his voice calm but firm, resonating through the tension-filled room. "She abused me for 6 months." The words hit me like a sledgehammer. My knees nearly gave way. The air felt thick and suffocating, the walls closing in. The world as I knew it seemed to shatter around me. "Lies!" Lillian screamed, her voice shrill, tears streaming down her bruised cheeks. "I only ever loved him." But her father, George, suddenly went pale, his eyes widening as though he had just realized something he had known all along. Ethan pulled out his phone and navigated to a hidden folder of photos. My stomach turned, a cold shiver crawling down my spine as I glimpsed the evidence. Messages from Lillian, her tone disturbingly manipulative, telling him things like, "Any 15-year-old boy would want this, and you should be grateful for me." Lillian lunged for the phone, stammering, "They're taken out of context." But the truth was self-evident. She had already admitted the images were real. Ethan's hands trembled, his voice choked with emotion. "I told Dad 3 months ago, but he said she was just being friendly." Grandpa laughed and said I was a lucky kid. And Clara told me not to overreact. Everyone told me to shut up. Blood rushed to my head, my body searing with a mixture of fury and heartbreak. The betrayal, the helplessness of months of warning that went unheard, it was almost too much to bear. But the worst was yet to come. "Last week," Ethan continued, his voice barely above a whisper, "I saw her leaving Tommy's room at 2 a.m. Tommy. My younger son, 10, Ethan's half-brother from James's previous marriage, the small boy who had trusted us to protect him. "On the day of the wedding," Ethan said, tears welling in his eyes. "I begged Dad, but he said, 'Not now.' I knew there was only one way to stop her." I turned to Tommy. The boy pressed close to Ethan's side, nodding slightly when I asked him if Lillian had done anything to him. My breath caught in my throat. As he tugged up his pajama pants, the deep bruises along his thighs made my blood run cold. My hands trembled, my heart hammering, unable to process the magnitude of this revelation. Patricia, Lillian's mother, shrieked, her voice sharp and accusatory. "You promised! You went to therapy." The word again hung in the air, freezing the room in a stunned silence. Lillian had a history, and her family had known all along. The implications were suffocating. I felt my chest tighten, a mix of rage, sorrow, and disbelief swirling inside me. Every ounce of maternal instinct screamed at me to protect my children, to confront every adult who had turned a blind eye. I could hardly breathe, my mind racing, trying to calculate the next steps in this nightmare that had been festering in shadows for months. Ethan's small frame, bruised hands and all, suddenly seemed monumental in its courage. Despite his fear, despite the chaos and hostility surrounding him, he had spoken the truth, defending not only himself but also Tommy. He had faced every adult who dismissed him, confronted every lie, and stood firm. I reached for him instinctively, wrapping my arms around my son, pulling him close. "I believe you," I whispered, my voice trembling but resolute. "I will protect you, and we will get through this." In that room, charged with betrayal, fear, and shock, I realized the enormity of what had been hidden from us. The so-called adults, James, Lillian's parents, even parts of our own family, had failed to protect the children. But I would not fail. Not now. Not ever. The betrayal plot. I dialed 911 immediately, my hands shaking so violently I could barely press the numbers. Lillian bolted into the bathroom, slamming the door shut just 10 minutes before the police arrived. I had no idea what she was doing in there, but later, the horrifying truth came to light. The police station, a detective led me into an interrogation room and placed a thick file in front of me. My eyes widened in disbelief as I flipped through the pages. Inside were forged messages, supposedly from me to Lillian, telling her she could handle Ethan as necessary while I was away on duty. Another claimed I trusted her to discipline the boy. I had never sent such messages in my life. My blood ran cold when I realized that the timestamps on these fake messages coincided exactly with the moment Ethan had begun pleading for help from James. Police held my phone, photographed my hands, collected my fingerprints, and treated me as if I were complicit in the very crimes my son had endured. I could feel the walls of reality closing in, the room spinning around me. Lillian had used those 10 minutes in the bathroom to install a fake messaging app, fabricating evidence to frame me, to turn my life upside down. Every instinct screamed at me. This was a meticulously orchestrated betrayal, a trap laid to destroy not only my credibility but also to silence the truth. Desperate and terrified, I reached out to Rachel Dawson, 42, a criminal defense attorney in Raleigh whom a trusted friend had recommended. Rachel listened calmly but with an intensity that made me feel a shred of hope return. She immediately ordered that my phone be secured and preserved, preventing any further tampering. Rachel's eyes narrowed as she questioned the history of Lillian's device, suspecting that she had looked up methods to falsify messages and create a digital frame against me. "These things are rarely random," Rachel said, her voice firm. "Someone went to great lengths to make this look legitimate. We need to gather everything, timestamps, device logs, search histories, to prove it." I nodded, my hands trembling, my mind still reeling. It was hard to process that amidst all the chaos, there was a calculated plan to manipulate evidence against me. The betrayal cut deeper than the bruises on my children's bodies. Every thought of Lillian's calculated deception made my heart pound and my stomach churn. In that sterile, fluorescent-lit interrogation room, a sense of surreal dread weighed heavily upon me. I realized that the battle for justice would not only involve proving my son's innocence but also uncovering the deliberate, vile schemes of a woman willing to turn her lies into law-enforced consequences. But with Rachel guiding me, carefully strategizing, I felt a fragile glimmer of control returning to my hands, a first step toward reclaiming the truth and protecting my family from the nightmare that had been set in motion. A letter from the past. A week later, while staying at a friend's house, I received an anonymous handwritten letter in the mail. The paper was yellowed and worn, the shaky handwriting sending a chill down my spine. "Lillian has done this before. Check St. Mary's Hospital in Charlotte, 2018. My heart raced, thudding painfully against my ribs. Rachel immediately began tracing the lead. Her investigation revealed that Lillian had indeed been under scrutiny years earlier for inappropriate conduct involving a pediatric patient at the hospital where she had worked. The case had been dismissed due to lack of evidence, leaving only a faint, troubling trace of her past. The letter was both a glimmer of hope and a knife twisting in my chest, proof that Lillian was a calculated predator, planning her actions meticulously. Meanwhile, James began appearing unexpectedly at my friend's house, pounding on doors and demanding to see Tommy. One night, he arrived drunk, his rage escalating uncontrollably. He kicked the glass of the front door, shattering it, sending Tommy diving into the closet, sobbing uncontrollably. The fear in Tommy's eyes tore at my heart, each tear a reminder of the danger surrounding my children. Ethan, his arms wrapped protectively around his younger brother, whispered fiercely, "I won't let anyone hurt you again." His bravery and resolve were a small comfort, but the situation was terrifyingly out of control. I grabbed my phone and started recording, dialing 911 as James raged outside, but the police explained that without a restraining order, they had no legal grounds to detain him. Rachel acted immediately, filing an emergency request for a protective order to safeguard the boys. The wait, however, would take a full week, a week in which we had to remain vigilant, constantly alert to James's unpredictable behavior and Lillian's potential schemes. Each creaking sound, each knock at the door sent a spike of panic through me. The letter had uncovered part of Lillian's dark history, but it had also made clear just how dangerously cunning she truly was. As I watched Ethan hold Tommy close, I realized the burden on our shoulders. We were navigating a treacherous landscape of lies, manipulation, and past transgressions, forced to outwit not only a calculating woman but also the flawed adults around us. The anonymous letter was a lifeline, yes, but it also reminded me that vigilance, courage, and swift action would be the only way to protect my sons in the days ahead. The journey for justice. Derek Hayes, 45, a child protective services officer, arrived at our temporary residence to interview Ethan and Tommy. Tension in the air was palpable as he set up his equipment, his calm yet authoritative demeanor a small anchor amid the storm of our lives. Ethan sat upright, bruises fading on his small hands and wrists, but the weight of his ordeal clear in the set of his jaw and the seriousness in his eyes. Tommy huddled beside him, his little body trembling, clutching a blanket that did little to shield him from the fear that lingered like a shadow. Ethan recounted in painstaking detail the nights Lillian had slipped into his room at midnight, whispering threats so cold and precise that they cut through his very sense of safety. "If you tell anyone," he said, his voice shaking but steady, "our family will fall apart. No one will believe you. You'll ruin everything." The words, so casual in her mouth, had struck terror into a 15-year-old boy. Tommy, his voice barely audible, revealed the bruises on his legs and arms, marks that were already healing but could not erase the pain or fear etched into his small frame. Derek documented everything meticulously, snapping photographs, taking notes, ensuring that the evidence of abuse was irrefutable. A nurse examined both boys, confirming physical signs consistent with abuse. Relief and anguish collided within me. I felt lightened by the confirmation of the truth, yet my heart ached for the suffering my children had endured. Each bruise, each anxious glance was a painful reminder that justice was not just about proving innocence, it was about healing the wounds inflicted upon them. Meanwhile, Rachel uncovered a critical piece of evidence. Lillian had searched online for how to forge messages for court on her computer a week before the wedding. Phone records confirmed that no messages had ever been sent from me to Lillian. A technology expert, Corey Mitchell, 30, verified that a fake messaging application had been installed on Lillian's phone during the 10-minute window she had locked herself in the bathroom. The timing was precise, the fabrication was deliberate. But Lillian did not stop there. Once the fabricated messages were in motion, she spread rumors online, a malicious campaign that brought hundreds of threatening messages to my inbox. Some included photographs of our current residence with chilling threats of arson. I felt trapped, hunted, my sense of security shredded. Rachel immediately hired private security, but even then, sleep eluded me. Every creak of the floorboards, every knock on the door, sent my heart racing as I imagined the worst for my children. The ordeal extended into my professional life. Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin Walsh, 50, my commanding officer, summoned me for a meeting. He informed me that my security clearance was under review due to the incident, placing me on hold from all duties. Weeks of dedication, nights spent on battlefield triage, countless surgeries saving lives, it all seemed irrelevant now, overshadowed by the lies of a predator. One morning, I received the official notice, a reprimand citing conduct that negatively impacted the unit. 15 years of service, years of sacrifice and commitment, reduced to a footnote by someone else's calculated malice. As if the nightmare weren't enough, school reports revealed that Tommy had shown warning signs for 6 months prior to the wedding. His grades had dropped, he frequently missed classes, and he often fell asleep in school. Teachers had reached out to James, his father, explaining the behavioral changes, but James's response was dismissive and infuriating. The boy was simply adjusting to his stepmother. Rage and helplessness churned inside me. I wanted to scream at the sheer irresponsibility and negligence that had allowed this abuse to continue unchecked. Even with Derek's investigation, Rachel's legal acumen, and the security measures in place, I realized that this journey for justice would be long and grueling. Lillian had shown herself to be cunning, manipulative, and ruthless, capable of twisting truth into weaponized lies, while the adults around her had failed to see, to act, or to protect. Every piece of evidence we collected felt like a victory, yet each discovery also unveiled the depth of what my children had suffered. Ethan, once timid and withdrawn, now bore the burden of truth with remarkable courage. He had confronted threats, documented abuse, and stood up for his brother, his spine straight despite the trauma etched into his body. Watching him, I realized that justice was no longer just a legal battle, it was a moral imperative. Protecting my children required unwavering resolve, meticulous strategy, and an unshakable belief in the truth. Amid this chaos, I understood the fragility of safety, the price of vigilance, and the courage it takes to confront injustice. Each step forward, every legal filing, every testimony was a shield for my children and a strike against a predator determined to manipulate and destroy. The road ahead would be arduous, but with Rachel, Derek, and the law on our side, I vowed to reclaim the peace and security that Lillian and James had threatened to steal from us. Through sleepless nights, fear, and uncertainty, one thing became crystal clear. The pursuit of justice was not just about exposing lies. It was about restoring dignity, safety, and hope to the lives of the children I loved more than anything. And I would not stop until that goal was achieved, no matter the cost. The light at the end of the tunnel. Ethan faced the juvenile court with a quiet determination that belied the turmoil he had endured over the past months. Courtroom, sterile and imposing, felt less intimidating now, as though the truth we had fought so fiercely to uncover had already begun to shield him. Through reviewing the evidence, therapy reports, and the expert testimony, the judge approved a rehabilitation program tailored to help him heal and grow. 100 hours of community service at an animal rescue center, coupled with weekly therapy sessions. I watched as Ethan began his service, carefully tending to the dogs at the center, brushing their fur, feeding them, and walking them through the small, sunlit yards. For the first time in months, I saw a spark in his eyes, a glimmer of the boy I had known before the nightmare began. The simple act of caring for vulnerable animals seemed to awaken something in him, a sense of purpose and a reminder that kindness could exist even after so much pain. Meanwhile, Lillian's initial plea deal was revoked when therapy records from Michigan revealed her prior involvement with 3 other children. Prosecution added additional charges, but the trial was delayed for 8 months due to the protracted legal maneuvers of Lillian's attorney. She continued to attempt to twist the narrative, even filing a defamation lawsuit against me and demanding that I sign a non-disclosure agreement. Rachel tore the document in half, her voice unwavering. "We want justice, not money." The words echoed with moral clarity, reinforcing that our battle was never about profit but about truth, protection, and accountability. Tommy remained with my friend's foster family, who had embraced him as their own. Their love and care allowed him to begin trusting again. Slowly, he started to laugh more, though nightmares still haunted him, reminding me how long the path to recovery would be. Each smile, each burst of laughter was a small victory against the trauma that had shadowed his childhood. Ethan gradually opened up in his therapy sessions, using art as a language to express the pain he could not yet verbalize. He painted birds perched on trees, forests bathed in sunlight, and skies that seemed impossibly wide, each stroke a tentative sharing of his inner world, a small bridge between his trauma and the world outside. Watching him create, I felt both heartache and pride. The boy who had been silenced and threatened was finding his voice again, learning that he could heal without shame. Even James, for all his earlier negligence, began attending parenting classes. He admitted, reluctantly but sincerely, that he had ignored warning signs, turning a blind eye to Tommy's distress and Ethan's fear. The process was slow, uncomfortable, and full of self-recrimination. It was not absolution, but a recognition that his inaction had consequences, and perhaps the first step toward understanding the gravity of his failures. James's family, once hostile and indifferent, began offering tentative apologies. Their words were halting, awkward, a pale shadow of the support we had desperately needed during the darkest months. But I could not trust them again. The damage had been done. Their regret did not erase the suffering my children had endured, nor the betrayal of inaction that had prolonged it. Still, amid all the legal wrangling, therapy, and reconciliation attempts, there was hope. Hope that Ethan could reclaim his confidence and sense of self. Hope that Tommy could feel safe, nurtured, and loved without fear. Hope that the nightmare imposed by Lillian and enabled by the negligence of adults would not define the rest of their lives. Standing in the animal rescue center one afternoon, I watched Ethan laugh as a small terrier jumped into his arms. The sunlight caught his hair, the warmth on his face mirrored in his cautious yet genuine smile. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to believe that healing was possible. Not complete, not without scars, but real and attainable. The journey had been harrowing, a labyrinth of lies, threats, and heartbreak, but the path toward justice and recovery was finally clear. And as I held Tommy's hand that evening, feeling the softness of his small fingers entwined with mine, I realized that even after the darkest tunnels, light could return. We were not free of pain, but we were on our way. Conclusion and lessons learned. Last night, I sat alone at the kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of legal documents, therapy schedules, and notes I had painstakingly compiled over the months. The house was quiet, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator, but the weight of the past year pressed heavily on my shoulders. The battle was far from over. There were still court dates, follow-ups, and lingering threats, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a fragile sense of calm. Ethan was asleep in his room, safe and not in a juvenile detention facility. Tommy was protected, wrapped in love, and surrounded by the care of those who genuinely wanted the best for him. I could not predict the future. I could not guarantee that every hardship had been resolved or that the scars on my children's hearts would ever fully heal. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty: I would never stop fighting for them. Every step I had taken, every tear I had shed, every sleepless night had been for the two boys who depended on me. And in that quiet kitchen, I allowed myself to reflect on what this journey had taught me, lessons that I hoped could help others facing their own struggles. Lesson 1: Trust your instincts. From the very beginning, I knew something was wrong. Even when others dismissed my concerns, I listened to my inner voice and acted. Mothers, parents, and caregivers often have an intuition honed by love. Never ignore it. Lesson 2: Courage comes in many forms. Courage is not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it is quietly insisting on the truth, documenting evidence, or standing firm against manipulation. Ethan's bravery inspired me to act, and mine inspired him to heal. Lesson 3: Seek allies and expertise. I could not have navigated this labyrinth alone. Rachel, Derek, Corey, and the foster family were pillars of strength. Knowing when to ask for help and trusting skilled professionals can be life-saving. Lesson 4: Protecting children is paramount. Every legal maneuver, every therapy session, every security precaution was centered on safeguarding Ethan and Tommy. The adults around them may fail, but as a parent, your role is to be their shield, advocate, and unwavering source of safety. Lesson 5: Hope and healing are possible. Even after the darkest moments, light can return. Ethan's laughter at the animal rescue center, Tommy's gradual smiles, and the small daily victories reminded me that healing is a journey, not a destination. Pain may leave scars, but love, patience, and perseverance can nurture recovery. This story has been heavy, deeply emotional, and at times unbearable to recount. But sharing it is part of the process, both for my own healing and to remind others that speaking the truth matters, even when it is painful. If you have read this far, I want to thank you. Leaving a comment helps me feel less alone in this journey, and it reminds me that others are listening, caring, and supporting those who have faced unimaginable challenges. If you believe this story deserves to be heard, please hit the share button. Share it with friends, family, or anyone who might need encouragement to speak up or take action in difficult situations. And if you want to follow this channel for more stories of resilience, courage, and the pursuit of justice, make sure to subscribe and join a community that values truth and compassion. No matter how heavy the burden, no matter how long the night, there is always a way forward. For Ethan, for Tommy, and for every child whose voice is silenced, I will continue to fight. And I hope that by sharing our story, others will find the courage to do the same.